It's a Tuesday, an unusual day for us, obviously, on Ubuntu Lifestyle, but we just had to do it because yesterday, of course, we didn't manage to do the show. Apologies for that. But we are here on Tuesday, the 20th of June, 2023, and we are live on Ubuntu channel. Whatever platform you're watching us, thank you so much for joining us. My name is Lawrence Mulungu, your usual host. And this week, we continue on a subject that we started on 2 weeks ago, which is looking at child defilement. And this week, we are looking at our community response to child defilement. And this week, I have a very special guest I'm so delighted to have. And of course, representing, coming from the Zambia Police Service, we are looking at the National Coordinator for the Victim Support Unit. That is Madam Meamui Gloria Mubita. Madam, good evening and welcome to Ubuntu channel.
Good evening. Thank you very much for hosting me.
I'm so delighted to have you because when we started this particular topic, I think we have looked at this from quite a number of angles, and we thought probably the Victim Support Unit can help us understand a side which actually concerns them when it comes to this vice. And so grateful that you heeded to our call when we asked you to show up, and you did just that. Thank you so much, Madam, for honoring our request to be on the show.
You're most welcome. Thank you for hosting me as well.
All right. Thank you so much. Now, to set the ball rolling, I think I'm just going to ask you to just give us a little bit of some functions of the Victim Support Unit under the Zambia Police Service, and what exactly it deals with and all that, so that we can open up some viewers who might not be aware of your functions.
Okay, so thank you very much. I hope I'm audible enough.
Loud
So,
and clear.
thank you. So, the Victim Support Unit was established by an Act of Parliament through Amendment number 14 of 1999 as a consequence of police reform. So, it's a product of the police reforms. At the time, the government and indeed the police service were trying to take closer the services to the people, owing to the history of the Zambia police in terms of it having come through from the colonial rule and all those stages. And then there was a lot of human rights abuses, particularly affecting women and children. And that's how it was established. So, broadly speaking, the victim support has two main functions. That is, one, to provide professional counseling to victims of crime and to offenders, then as well as to protect citizens from various forms of abuse. That is exactly how it's couched in the Zambia Police Act, Section 53. So for us to be able to achieve those two functions, we do a number of activities, including one, receiving reports of gender-based violence as a specialized unit that deals with gender-based violence. Then also apprehend suspects, arrest suspects, investigate, and then also compile dockets of cases, and then we forward them to the National Prosecutions Authority for prosecution. And then also, since we don't work alone, we have a lot of stakeholders, both governmental and non-governmental organizations. So we also play a very critical referral role by virtue of us being first responders when it comes to gender-based violence. So we do refer our victims for other services, for example, like medical treatment and examination. Of course, also for us to be able to obtain medical evidence as regards defilement, of course. And then also for our victims who are in need of shelter through the Department of Social Welfare, which is mandated to provide shelter for such victims. We also do referrals, and in this to many other of our stakeholders that deal with GBV and who try very hard even behind the scenes to ensure that the victims of gender-based violence are indeed protected and supported throughout the process.
Thank you so much for that. For our viewers out there, please be reminded that you are free to leave questions, comments, and also your views and opinions on whatever platform you're watching us from, so that we can be able to also hear what you have to say concerning the subject matter we have at hand this evening. As we continue, Madam Gloria, I'm not sure if you mind if I call you Madam Gloria.
I don't mind. That's my name.
Thank you so much. So as we go on, Madam Gloria, I think we would love to get also going into the topic at hand, how you from your angle look at child defilement. What do you term as child defilement?
So, according to our laws, a defilement is having unlawful carnal knowledge of a child below the age of 16.
Now, a lot of times, perpetrators will claim they didn't know that the victim was actually below the age of 16. So, is that also classified as defilement?
Absolutely. I mean, what determines in this context is the age of a child. And then I should also hasten to mention that even where a child has consented, particularly to those children who may be borderline ages like 15, 14, 13, some girls would look bigger than 13, 12, when in fact they're minors. So even when they consent, provided that the particular victim in question is a child as defined by our laws in the penal code, then they are defiled, and therefore the person that has defiled them should answer by law and be accountable for his actions.
Now, actually, I think that is one of the conversations that we had the last time we had the program. And this time around, a lot of men would say uh, um, girls these days look bigger than their age. Even 11 years old, 11-year-old girls would look like they are 18. And sometimes the same girls would even lie and tell a fake age. Later on, the man is arrested and said no, this was defilement, and he says, but I really asked and she told me this. How do you handle such?
Well, for us, because we are investigators, our job is that to really just ensure that we have all the evidence. Those arguments about whether the child looked older or they lied are not for us to determine. Us is to present the case to the prosecutors and in court the way it is, and then that is up to the courts to decide whether, under those circumstances, the person would be considered. Because I think we have cases in incidences where those arguments are brought into court. But really, for us police officers, once a crime is committed, our interest is to so we leave them to the courts of law for the defense and the state witness and the court eventually to determine.
Okay, so if we can look at from experience, how do such cases end up like?
Well, these cases do go up to, some of these cases do go up to the courts of law, and we have secured a number of convictions around child defilement. But of course, we have cases like you rightly were inquiring around certain circumstances that may be forced on inquiry. And that is why it's our duty as police officers to thoroughly investigate these cases to ensure that we do not bring into our custody somebody who, even on the first instance, after preliminary investigations, is not even a suspect. So there are cases that may be closed because they are forced on inquiry. And so then it's our duty to ensure that we just thoroughly investigate the cases. But we do have those that go way up to the court. We secure convictions in others, and in others, as you know, justice is a double-edged sword.
Yeah.
Others, we actually have our suspects acquitted in court, the accused.
Now, I'm trying to preempt a lot of minute issues that and technicalities that come around this subject before we go into the nitty gritties of the details of our subject matter. So I'll also ask, what what direct measures is the victim support unit taking to ensure that this vice is also not just fought looking at the girl child, but also the boy child? Because I think quite a number of young boys even fail to come out because they don't believe someone will even give them a listening ear.
Okay. So when you look at the definition of defilement itself, it's child defilement, meaning it encompasses both girls and boys. So what we do is we do have school sensitization programs. As you may be aware, one of the functions of the police is to prevent crime. So we do have sensitization programs in schools where we talk to the children in schools. And like you rightly put it, a number of our children, particularly boys, really kind of fall outside the margin and are very vulnerable. And what we are doing as police is, apart from that, there's a lot of capacity building that is being done by funded by government and stakeholders as well. Currently, actually, we realize that GBV has not really, when I say GBV, I'm speaking about development as well, hasn't been for a long time mainstreamed in our curricula. It's just been an offense like any other offense. So therefore, we're now developing a training manual, and that's one of the reasons that actually made me come late, because we are finalizing the training manual for police officers of all ranks at initial and in service level, and as well as our some of our stakeholders who deal with GBV. So then we want everyone to be aware of how these cases should be dealt with, because the problem sometimes is also in the way we handle them. If we do not handle the cases well as a police service, right from the front desk when it's being reported, then we stand to discourage so many people. Once one victim says, even if you go to the police, they're not going to provide you with services that you expect, then we expect more people not to come forward. So now what we are doing is we are building a lot of capacity of our officers in police stations. We have sensitization programs. Just last week, the Inspector General had funded a national sensitization campaigns campaign selected areas as a national office. We get down to support them. We have also developed brochures on defilement that are being distributed in police stations countrywide. So those are some of the measures that we are doing to ensure that people are aware. We also always on national TV, on radio, trying to talk about the same, so that at least parents can be wary of how best to protect their children, to be wary of who they leave their children with, regardless of sex. Because now the concentration, I think at some point, was more on the girl child, but now we've realized that the boys are also very vulnerable. And so the message to all is that we try as much as possible to protect our children. And then the children themselves should be able to come forward to speak. So without the information, some of these defilements actually happen within domestic settings, which makes it very difficult for children to report their own parents. And sometimes when they report, for example, their male parent or relative to their mother or to a female guardian, usually they are looked down upon and not believed. Even when they are believed anyway, usually the idea is to protect their family member from not going to jail. So now we want the children themselves, we want to create age appropriate content for the children to be able to have a direct link with police officers in police stations. And I think, speaking of this, I would want to really amplify on the successes of Victim Support Unit as a unit within the Crime Prevention and Support Services, which is directly under the Inspector General Police Operations, that the schools liaison unit actually is one that is expected or designed to have permanent relationships with schools, so much so that when children cannot have support from within their home settings, they should be able to disclose to their teachers, who in turn should contact a police officer to be able to process the case, so that at least when a child is given that attention early enough, even issues of interference and children being hostile and not giving out information are also taken to shelters
Okay,
where
okay,
they are
okay.
safe.
I
Yeah.
think we it's a matter of network connectivity there. I'm not sure. Do we have you back, Madam Gloria?
Yeah, I can see you. I don't know whether you can see me.
Yeah, I can see you. Please, you can continue.
Okay, I don't even know what I said because I think I said so much. So anyway, the idea is, I think for a long time we have spoken to parents, we have spoken to the communities, but then we have challenges surrounding defilements that happen within domestic settings. So now, what is our strategy? Our strategy is to reach out to the children themselves, so that when they are defiled within the school environment, when they are defiled outside the school environment but not in their homes, they should be able to report to the other person who's able to help them. For example, tell the children that once they are defiled, they should be free to report to the teachers. And the teachers have relationships with our sister unit, schools liaisons unit, who they're supposed to talk to, and then quickly VSU is brought on board. So our children are given the immediate attention in terms of medical examinations as well as shelter, because in most of these cases that where suspects are from within the domestic setting, children really suffer a lot of interference in terms of the quality of stories they share, the statements that we need to go forward with the court. So when the teachers are in contact with the police officers, either in the VSU or in the schools liaison unit, we're able to process the children very quickly to the hospitals and also ensure we provide shelter for them so that their stories are not tampered with.
Hey, to our viewers out there, remember you are on Ubuntu channel, and we are looking at community response to child defilement. You can also participate in the program by leaving a comment in the comment sections of whatever platform you're watching us from. And also, we shall be sharing the link for those who want to come and ask my guest a question right in the studio. That is coming later on in the program. Uh, Madam, I think one of the hindrances, I think, to fighting this vice has been the fact that families will try by all means to solve all these issues right in the family, so that they don't disgrace the name of whoever is actually the culprit, the perpetrator of the vice, to the community out there. Do we have any laws whatsoever that would try to punish families for trying to hide these things?
Okay, so thank you very much. I will just talk about really the laws that tend to protect children from that kind of arrangement where parents sit outside and talk and then money exchange hands. The anti-GBV Act of 2011 actually speaks about even in circumstances where the families decide to settle the matter out of court, that is not a bar to continuing the investigation and prosecution. And I think for me, that is really very key. But then at the end of the day, the progress around that law depends really on how prompt we respond to these cases. And usually there's so much evidence that we need, particularly medical evidence. But I should also hasten to say that today we have made progress in that even where we don't have medical evidence, provided we have other corroborating pieces of evidence, we can still move to court and we have secured convictions in that regard. So I think what is very important is prompt response to ensuring that the children themselves are taken care of immediately in terms of medical evidence and also in terms of the people surrounding them. What are they telling them? How are they coaching them? And so that is why I spoke about really the the effectiveness or prompt response in terms of when a child discloses, particularly to probably the school authorities or other people other than in the home, so that they are quickly taken care of. So the law that really is very close to my heart is the fact that even where they settle the matter out of court, that is not a bar to an investigation.
Okay. In a nutshell, we are looking at if this happens in the home, maybe the father is the perpetrator defiles a daughter or something like that, and the mother feels if the father is locked up, here we are going to suffer. Won't have any. We will lose our breadwinner. The name of my husband will be diminished out there, to be dented, all these things. And when she puts A and B together, she feels maybe the best way is you tell the child just keep it quiet and never mention it to anybody. And if that happens, as long as nobody ever reports, then it ends just like that.
Absolutely. I mean, that is a most problematic and issue. And that is why we are saying we are now changing also our strategies around really who are we talking to around defilement. So we have spoken to the parents, and I believe that on average, a Zambian, particularly these who are in towns, really know what defilement is. But the problem is that the more information they have, the more they want to use it to intimidate their children, to silence their children. And now what we are saying is this, that it's the children that go through that abuse, the pain, both mental, emotional, and also physically, sexually. Some are contract diseases, and just the fact that those are children, obviously there's that pain itself. So we are now changing the narrative by ensuring that we debunk the myths around defilement. The fact that when the children are told not to tell anyone, or should they do, they will be killed. We're telling them no. We're telling them to feel free to disclose to people that will be helpful to them. We're telling them to disclose to the schools, to their teachers. We're telling them to disclose to the neighbors. Neighbors are also very helpful in ensuring that these children are protected, because once they have the information and they know the consequences, they know how best and who to approach so that we can quickly move on. So that has been a very problematic issue, because whilst we feel we are sensitizing communities, the same parents, guardians who are supposed to protect the children also have their own interest to protect. So now we just need to change our strategies and see how best we can protect the children.
Okay. Let's get into community response. First question that comes to mind is how can one know that we have a potential defiler in the society? How can we identify that?
To be honest with you, um, it's one question that is very, very difficult to most of the defilers that is why the children usually end up like this. And when I say children, I'm talking about all those who are under 16, including somebody whose birthday is tomorrow. The challenge is that the people that defile these children, usually, especially in a home setting, are people they trust.
Yeah.
So depending on their ages, they are able to, children are very easy to groom and coach. So the same person that you think this one is the uncle to my daughter, or the uncle to my, is my brother, as a parent, I'll be free to leave my child with my brother because they're related by consanguinity, and naturally we don't expect people that are related by blood to do those things, and they'll be just okay. Throughout, they'll be okay. Throughout, they'll be okay. And when they
Mhm.
strike, you will not believe that they've struck you. You go like, what really happened? I thought that this guy was good to my children. Some actually would play distant. Some would not even want to be seen to be too close to the children, but they'll still strike. Some will be too close, and then the parents will go like, no, because they are related by blood. That's the cousin. That's the uncle, that's the grandfather. But these are the people that are doing these things, and that is why the children really need to be protected, because in the homes where they should be safe, they're not safe at all. So it's very difficult to tell who a potential defiler is because of the way just these people are and relate to the children. So they are trusted by the children. That is why when they say do this, don't say this to your mother, don't say this to your dad, they'll die. They believe because they trust those people. So it's a very difficult question. But the most important thing and overriding factor is that we should just try as much as possible to protect our children. And where we cannot, we as parents that care for those children should be able to tell them, to be free to tell them what they have been doing and with who did this to them. And that culture of talking, so the culture of silence is broken. So our children are able to say something at least, you know.
I'm actually going to ask you to just elaborate more when you say protect the children. What exactly does that involve? Because I think it's safe to say that the stories that we are getting in the media this time around, you would even wonder where a child is safe because these things are happening in schools, in their
Yeah.
homes. I think we recently heard of a case at a police station. So, what exactly does it mean when you say to protect the child?
Okay, I will start from it's very difficult because looking at from where we are coming as a people culturally, one tends to wonder whether maybe it's our modern way of life that has really brought this, but that is a case that needs research. But then when I say protect, for example, I just spoke about, for example, when it comes to defining a minor who's female, a female, a child victim. We have men in the homes, particularly. So when a child is being left in a home, for example, I think parents, when I say parents, there are parents, fathers in this regard who may be suspects, and those cases have been rising. I think now, where fathers are defiling children, but then a mother figure should ensure in that home there's somebody that should take care of the child, particularly a female figure. It's difficult because some homes are male dominant, you know.
Yeah.
But then those are things that even as you leave and go for work, you should be able to say, who did I leave my child with in the home setting? Of course, we have defilements also that happen outside the home, neighborhood defilements. So it's just to put an extra eye and ensure that when they are defiled, a normal parent should be able to take action to ensure that the child gets her justice. Because it's either she's protected or not. But if she wasn't protected, then let people quickly report so that child can be assisted. There are issues of diseases, there are issues of her justice as well, her rights, her confidence, and all those things they need to that need to be taken care of. So where a child may not be protected because of what I've tried to outline is very, very complex, then people should quickly be able to ensure that the child gets her justice, the child gets treated on time.
I was going to ask you next what exactly the effects are to the victims when these things happen. You've scratched on it already, but I'll ask you to just elaborate on that one, so that everyone watching can understand what these things can do to a child.
Yeah. Okay, so physically, physically we have children, these are minors. They really bleed. If you've seen a defiled child, some of them really bleed profusely. So the pain that they undergo, and then we also have diseases. A number of them do contract sexually transmitted diseases, even HIV in the long run. And some children also get pregnant as well. So in a nutshell, but also not to forget about them psychological, emotional effects that they go through as children. When it comes to the children that are in school, for example, some disclosures around defilement have been possible because teachers have been able to to compare a child's behavior before they were defiled and when they were defiled. So by asking, seeing how the performance is going, their confidence, they're lonely, they withdraw the signs, they're not even performing well. Children have been able to say it's because of A, B, C, D. So that is a whole range. And you can imagine if adults also that go through such kind of abuses like rape in that regard are able to be that highly traumatized, you can imagine the pain and what it does to a child who doesn't even know anything.
Okay, at this stage, I'll ask my producer to share the link on our social media platforms as we prepare to take in just one or two who can come into the studio to ask you a question, and also get the messages that have come through ready so that we can read them aloud on screen. Um, as we await for that, I would want to know from you, um, if as a community member, you suspect a child having gone through that, having been defiled, even when the people they stay with have decided not to act on it, can a member of the community go to the police and report such a suspicion?
Absolutely, and that is a message that we are taken very seriously when we do our sensitizations, because of the obvious reasons that we have already discussed around families protecting each other, people not going to jail and the like. So neighbors have been very helpful, even just ordinary people who are not neighbors. I have a case in mind, really, of a 7-year-old was defiled a few years ago when I was working from Chipata. She was in a school uniform but ended up in a bar. And when she was asked why she was in a school uniform and was in a bar, she disclosed that she didn't know what to do anymore because her father, who was a security guard, was always defiling her. Her mother was a maid. So, the roles of those two people are actually opposite. The man goes for work in the evening, the woman goes in the morning. So each time the mother goes for work, before the child goes to school, the father will defile the child. So she made that disclosure to bar owners in a compound on her way to school. But she couldn't even go to school because of the pain. She couldn't even walk properly, by the way. So we implore neighbors to come on board and help us. People that suspect things to come on board, report so that we can investigate these cases thoroughly.
And as a community, when you apprehend a suspect of this vice, what are the correct ways of handling such a one? Because I think there is always that overzealousness where people tend to administer mob justice instantly there and then. So what is the correct approach to people who you suspect have done this?
Okay, so there are two things here. There's where a suspicion will be there, but they haven't been caught in the act, for example, or a child has disclosed maybe through a friend, and children talk, and the friend has said something, or the child has trusted this particular neighbor and they've disclosed, or teacher. They should just come and report. As for the apprehensions, the police will apprehend. But there's no harm, once everything is established, for members of the community to apprehend the suspect and just take them to the police without administering any form of mob justice. Because by so doing, they'll also be committing offenses. And then there's that other one where a suspect is found red handed, for example, in an unfinished building or wherever they may be in a bush. They have the right to apprehend them. That is what is called a citizen's arrest. So you apprehend the suspect and just ensure you convey them to the nearest police station so that the police officers on duty can deal with them diligently as Bible provided.
Quite a number of times when some of these things are reported and people seem to be very sure of these things happening. So, and then just a few days later, you see the person is actually scot-free in society, back as if nothing happened. And people tend to say, obviously, obviously, this and that happened. What could lead to a suspect, a person who the community is very sure and suspect that this person actually committed the act, and then they come back?
Okay, so on the other side, we have suspects who also have rights, for example, and you know that it's just that the law is, like I said, is double. So you are either this side or that side. So when a suspect is detained in police custody or is arrested, they have the right to bond. So in some of those cases, it is where the suspect is on bond, and bond does not mean that then the case has ended. I think what is important for us also as police officers is to ensure we communicate the steps to the immediate family to understand the process, because if there are gaps in terms of really what is going on, that breeds suspicion. Then yeah, so that's actually one. But in some cases, we may have cases where I had already alluded to the fact that some reports may be forced on inquiry. So once investigations are concluded and all pointers do not actually point to that particular person who was being suspected, we actually close the cases as forced on inquiry as well. So you may see somebody back into the community because after investigations, after identification parades, somebody else and not the person who was brought is actually the suspect.
Okay. Our viewers out there, thank you so much for your comments. We're about to go into them, but remember, there is a link shared on the comment section there. You are free to click on it you'll be able to join us in the studio live and direct so that we can have a conversation and you can be able to ask your question. Remember, if you make it into the studio, we will not allow any abusive language, we will not allow any uncivility and all that. We just hope to have a conversation and in a civilized manner. Remember that. So, look, going to the comments, we have a comment from Chanda Miova, which is on the screen right now, saying, sometimes the law enforcers are very intimidating and they also intimidate the victim to an extent that they start blaming the victims, hence triggering fear in some victims to open to the victim support. So, what measures have you put to make sure that these children feel safe? That is a question that we've received from Chandamiwa. Maybe we can go to another one before you can get to respond. We have a question from Himba Mioba saying, what other services do the victim support unit offer? Thank you so much for that question. Probably you can take in another one. Chibonta Jule saying, I'm loving the clarifications. Thank you, Lawrence and Madam Gloria. Thank you so much also for tuning in. Probably you can take in those first before we can proceed.
Okay, so the first one was us being yes, 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 or intimidating. That is the more reason why I said when I knocked off from work, I struggled. One of the things that we know for sure is that the uniform itself can be very intimidating even before we actually verbally intimidate somebody. So one of the things that we now do is that all police officers who are in the victim support unit do not wear a uniform, obviously, so that we create child-friendly police stations. But I think the most challenging thing has been the front desk officer. So, rightfully, when you look at our front desk, the way it's designed, for example, it's designed to receive reports of any kind, and that is actually really a public space. So, but that
Yeah,
doesn't justify the fact that we should intimidate people as they come in. So, what we are doing now is, you see, the inquiry is actually not private by virtue of the way it is. So what we are now doing is that we, like I mentioned, we really up to now don't have gender-based violence as incorporated in our curriculum. I think the next set of recruits will have it in the curriculum. So now what we are doing as a short-term measure is to ensure that we integrate front desk officers, the so-called inquiries officers,
yeah,
into victim support programming. So we have already created a database for front desk single points of contacts. But then after establishing the front desk single point of contacts, realize that with a high turnover in terms of transfers, for example, and then also these officers, when they're not on duty for whatever reason, they may be attending to other duties and other operations. What happens? So now what we have decided is that we train all front desk officers in all shifts, in all police stations countrywide. And I think so far we are doing quite well. The results may not be seen today because, as you know, the police service is very, very vast. But
yeah,
slowly, as a police service, we have actually admitted to the fact that our relationship with our victims hasn't been very good. And usually, myself, I'm a sexual and gender based violence trainer. I usually tell my officers to say, imagine you walking into a bank or an insurance company and you find somebody there and just look at how they attend to you. Wouldn't that be what you'd love also to do to the people that come through? Regardless of what case they've come to report, I think that we are moving towards that right direction. We've already developed in our module, actually, we've addressed aggressively the fact that front desk officers should not pull us back by intimidating our clients, because we know that they are the strategically positioned people to receive reports from the front desk. Even just a referral would demand them talking to the victim and knowing what their complaint is. So they will not be able to classify a GBV case if they don't talk to them. So, but when they talk to them, when they interact with them on face value, they should be able to be very respectful, try as much as possible not to shout, the privacy thing. And if there's need for a detailed account to be obtained for whatever reasons, they could simply move away and talk to them nicely. Then when VSU are working, we have VSU in all police stations and some police posts, they should be able to just convey them respectively to the VSU without intimidating them. I think for me, that is really, really huge and something that our trained front desk officers are really appreciating so far.
In that line, actually, one of the issues that I hear from members of the general public is the fact that probably the front desk or the inquiries there is particularly just a book where they have to write, and they do not write all the details whatsoever. So one client can come and report something, and when they make a follow up, they'll find a different office and then have to explain the same issue. So they end up explaining the same issue over and over to different number of officers. Are we looking at a situation where we have some sort of a database where someone will just come and will probably just bring the way we already have case numbers and the like, present a case number, and when they open, they should see everything already saved in the system?
Okay, maybe just to clarify on not writing, these cases actually, action taken after assessment depends on a number of factors. For example, there are times when a victim may not clearly speak around really what the abuse was. Obviously, some of the reasons could be that it's a front desk, there's a lot of officers. You see, for big police stations like Lusaka Central Police, for example, at the central police stations, which are bigger, you would find probably more than 5 officers at the same time attending to different people. You see, so now there are times when you can tell that this victim is not truly ready to even say anything. In that regard, the front desk officers will not force them to talk. The front desk officers who really know what they should do should not really get so much information. They'll just tell them to say, from what you've said already, I can detect that this is a sexual offense, this is a case of past battery, these are cases for the victim support, so please just go to the VSU and explain to them. Then the VSU will get the victim and then interview the victim after getting the whole story. Sometimes we find that in one case, there are multiple cases. The same person would have been raped, the same person would have been beaten, the same person. So they'll get all those details, and that is how the VSU themselves will move to the front desk where the occurrence book is and record those details. But for victims who are able to really clarify from the onset, we have different kinds of victims. For your information, in as much as the front desk might be intimidating, in as much as we know that these sexual offenses and GBV cases really border on morality, in some of the cases, there are things that you don't want to just scream about and everyone hears that so and so was raped yesterday. Some members of the community or victims themselves actually feel that the more they explain to the officer, the more they begin to feel better. You see, so when they explain and the officer on duty clearly gets what they're telling them, they'll immediately enter that matter into the occurrence book. But coming to your question around probably digitalizing operations of the police in that regard, we actually are in a process, very advanced process of digitalizing the entire occurrence book into an electronic occurrence book. And then further, we also looking to also ensuring that we have a hotline dedicated to gender-based violence to encourage more and more people to report. We know there are people that live far from police stations. There are people who live near police posts that may not be conducive in terms of space around handling these matters. So we want to also ensure that we have a line dedicated to GBV where people, even those who are near police stations, who don't want to go to police stations for whatever reason, can just pick up a call and then make their report. Mind you, at police training colleges, we also are expected to enter telephonic reports into occurrence book, just like we would do if somebody walked in there. So it's from the report that you can now further engage the victim and provide support services to ensure they go through the process up to where we can obtain justice for them.
All right. Thank you so much for that. And we continue with, we pick a couple more of messages as we try to conclude and all that. So we have a message on screen from Walens Miova. Says, hi panelists, thanks for the job you are doing. My questions to you are, the first one is child defilement bondable? And the second question is, how accessible are your centers across the country. I think we can move on to the next. We can pick one more, and we have a message from Mulungu Ruben Jerome, who says, "We hear some police officers obtain something to protect the offenders. How can one report such officers? Do you have a whistleblower policy?" Probably, I think those should be coming from two people, and there should be four questions. But maybe we pick this other one from Edith Nina Daka, which says, "Is there a law that punishes family members that try to shield and hide their family members from facing the law?" I think we can end from we can pick up to that, and then you get to respond.
Okay, there's been a lot of questions, but let me just start by also answering Himba's question. I think she asked which other services we provide. So we also provide counseling services to our victims of crime as well. Referral services, of course, like I said, we are not self-contained, so we do refer to stakeholders so that they can also provide services to our victims. And then the other question is about being bondable. Yes, the defilement is bondable. And that is one reason I alluded to when I spoke about people just suspects being found back into the community because they had their bond signed. But that doesn't mean that a case really um, has been discontinued. No. Then when it comes to a whistleblower policy, yes, we do have, and that is what keeps us going. You can imagine if people never reported these cases to us, people other than members of the family, I think would have a very low number of cases. But we are able to have these high reports because people are able to report to us and we protect them from any possible victimization. And where victimization arises due to some eventuality, we actually move in to shield it. So when it comes to, what was the other question?
Actually, the question you're answering also has a part which says, "How can one report officers who obtain something?"
Oh, okay. So a police officer is supposed to be one with integrity. So where we have reports of officers getting money to shield offenders, provided that we have that information available to us, we have a structure through which those officers should be reported. Mind you, we have our police service instructions and police standing orders, which actually detail or unpack offenses against discipline and even just crimes. Police officers are not above the law. So what we need to do is to have more of these reports around our officers that are getting some things from people, money of course to shield, to their supervisors. At station level, we have officers in charge of a police station. At district level, we have officers commanding districts. At provincial level, we have commissioners of police themselves. Of course, before you reach a police commissioner, also, we have people who are in charge of the victim support at provincial level. So people should ensure they report these cases so that we can have them protected as well and discourage this from amongst police officers.
Okay. I have someone actually waiting in the studio trying to come in. We should be having them coming through in the studio any minute from now. I'm sure the producer is working on that. But um, but there's a question on the screen actually, which is talking about safe houses for victims. That is maybe one of the victim who has reported actually feels unsafe in their house because probably they have reported the owner of their house. How do we handle them? Do we take them somewhere? Is there somewhere we can take them, or anything in those lines?
Yes. So when we have these victims, one of the things that we look at is their security. So we assess their needs, and then when we realize that they need security, we quickly notify social welfare. Social welfare has the mandate to provide safe houses. So we have currently very few government safe houses, but we have quite a number of safe houses being provided for by non-government organizations who are also stakeholders in the fight against um, abuse. So what happens is when you notify social welfare, they know which areas to take which category of victims. There are certain safe houses which are mainly for boys. They're those that are mainly for girls. So notify social welfare, and they'll be able to ensure that the victim is taken to the safe house, because the mandate to provide safe houses lies with social welfare. So in that regard, the police only plays a referral role to social welfare for them to be able to house the victim.
Thank you so much. My viewers out there, we are grateful that you have continued to engage us. I think at this point, that is where we'll end from with the messages. That we thank you so much for each and every one of them that has come through. We appreciate your correspondence, but obviously time cannot allow us to continue reading messages. I have seen Himba trying to come into the studio. Is Himba in? Welcome to the program, Madam Himba.
Thank you very much, Rollins. I have a question. Uh, by the way, good evening, Gloria. How are you?
I'm fine, yes, thank you.
My question is, I'm reacting from the one of the questions that prompted on the screen, which stated that um, are offenders are offenders allowed a police bond. So now my thinking is, what measures do you put when you release them back into the community where their cases are in court? What measures do you put in place that these offenders that does not commit other offenses in the community, or the community is safe from them, or they don't go back to the same victims whom they abused, or to intimidate them, or even trying to harm them so that they destroy evidence? And how safe is the community or the young people when you release them back into the community? What measures do you put in place to monitor them? Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much, Madam Himba, for that question. I think our guest can get to respond to that.
Okay. Um. So I don't know whether you can hear me.
Yeah, I can hear you loud and clear.
So a bond has conditions, and once a suspect is released into the community, should there be a report of them interfering or anything for that matter, and commit other crimes, then that bond will be revoked. That is the procedure.
So we have to wait for them to commit another crime, probably intimidate the victim or things like that, before we can act in those lines. But what if their actions are actually some of the are actually are going to have consequences or have repercussion on the case that is ongoing in court for them?
It's the same thing. So whatever it is that is going to jeopardize the investigation or the prosecution, the trial, that is the basis for revocation. And usually when they are given bond, they are also assessed. For example, if they are of no proper fixed about, they will not even given a bond. So some other measures will have to be put in place. And usually the easiest would be, there are certain cases which are very, very easy to investigate. And I'm talking about farming cases. So when you have all the evidence together, the best is just to ensure you forward a docket to the National Prosecutions Authority and expressly let the person appear in court. And then from there, they should be able to be remanded in a correction facility.
Okay, I'll give you a chance to give your closing remarks and probably give a few tips on self security, especially to the young ones.
Okay, thank you so much. So for the children, now the narrative has changed from don't talk to strangers, don't go close to strangers, but we can't forget it because we have cases where children are still being defiled by strangers. So they should be able to move in groups, protected. For the parents that pick the children, they should pick the children on time. And I know schools also have put in place measures to ensure that the rightful parents pick their children and not otherwise. But for in terms of in a home, um, I think what we tell the youngest ones who are very, very vulnerable in this regard is that the people who should be able to access their bodies, like touch them, peck them, kiss them, should be limited to probably a female parent, a peg or something like that, because from these same pegs and closeness, that is where we have such kind of problems. So when a child is touched in an appropriate manner, they should be able to quickly inform the guardian. And now I'm speaking about if they are inappropriately touched by any member of the family other than the parents, they should be able to report to the parents, mother, father. If it's or the guardians, if it's the father, let them report to the mother. But also now we're encouraging them more to talk more to their teachers, who we can quickly deal with and ensure these people are prosecuted before they can interfere with the cases.
I'll squeeze in just one more question. We had a spike of issues to do with sodomy not so long ago, which also involved children. Do you classify those also as a defilement? And now it changes the whole ball game together, because you might say, no, don't let the male parent or male relatives touch the girl child like this. Only allow the female relatives to touch the girl child. But this time around, even those can have different agendas.
Yes, absolutely. So that is why the content has to be very appropriate, and comprehensive. Now the narrative should change. We are coming from where we used to say that or the opposite, but now the narrative is changing. Is touching inappropriately should just be completely banned. But of course, we realize that as parents, I'm a mother. How do I welcome my son? How does my son welcome me?
Mhm.
So we just need to continue talking to our children, also know how they engage, who they engage with, also caution them about these possibilities. You brought in the issue of defilement, very key, of sodomy, very key. Defilement itself usually has been, even in the medical fields, way before it became very common to defile boys, for example, they would only examine a female child around um, the female genitalia and forgetting the anal region. Some suspects actually would prefer using the anal region, but now comprehensively and fortunately, the medical practitioners also are taught to do a comprehensive examination of the anal and the vaginal area. So it's just about how things are happening and how we talk to our children. Things have become too complex. Children are no longer safe in these homes, and so everything that needs to be done to protect them should be done. And when people begin to touch them inappropriately, even if they are of the same sex, that still constitutes an offense. Like you rightly mentioned, the sodomy, defilement of boys, defilement of girls. So all those things need to be packaged and then given to the children, particularly in schools. For me, really, I'm an ardent advocate of packaging age-appropriate content for children around sexual violence.
Thank you so much, Madam Gloria, for having come through. We really appreciate the time that you've shared with us. Everything that you've given us, the information is so much vital to help one or two or three or maybe even more people out there who are watching us on Ubuntu channel. Thank you so much, Madam.
Thank you so much for hosting the Inspector General's representative, the entire Zambian Police Service, and I hope that the interview has been very fruitful. So thank you very much once more for hosting us as a police service.
Thank you. To our viewers out there, thank you so much for joining us on this week's episode of Ubuntu Lifestyle, where we were looking at community response to child defilement. I was actually hosting the national coordinator for the victim support unit, who was actually representing the Zambia Police Service, and that is Madam Gloria Mubita, who was with us for this almost 1 hour now. And obviously, we appreciate everything that she has shared with us. Now, next week, we are back on Monday and not on the Tuesday like today, as we start another journey looking at the women who are making it in a man's world. That's what we're looking at on Ubuntu Lifestyle next week. And from us today in the studio, we thank you so much for joining us. We will be back, obviously, live on the Ubuntu channel in just about an hour's time when another group takes you through with the political program. This has been Lawrence Mulungu hosting you. Good night and pleasant viewing.